I take this opportunity to introduce you to Justice Venkatachalaih. Sri M.N. Venkatachalaih was the 25th Chief Justice of India and served from 1993 to 94. He has received the Padma Vibhushana, India's second highest civilian honor, from the President of India in 2004. He has served as the chairman of National Human Rights Commission from 1996 to 98, and in 2000 he headed the National Commission to review the working of the Constitution. He currently serves on the advisory board of the Foundation for Restoration of National Values that strives to restore national and cultural values of India. Sir, may I request you to kindly speak a few words.
Dr. Muni Krishna, President of this function, Dr. Sureshwara, the author of Ramayana, and Sri Niranjan Babu, very respected and distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen. This is the 101st birthday of Sri B.V. Raman, who gave dignity and authenticity to the science of Jyotisha. Today it has become a little fashionable to deride the science of astrology. There is a story, perhaps very authentic. Mr. Durga Das, a very eminent journalist, his son was Mr. Jitinder, who was the member of parliament. Durga Das wrote a chronicle of historical events of India. The book is called Curzon to Nehru, published sometime in the late 70s. He refers to an incident in which Pandit Nehru had an altercation virtually with an astrologer. His friend, Pandit Nehru's friend, Mr. Satyanarayan Sinha, was for some time Chief Minister of Bihar. Had a personal friend, an astrologer, who was with him all the time. On one occasion, Pandit Nehru visited Mr. Sinha in his residence and saw this astrologer seated in the drawing room. There is one small chapter in that book, Curzon to Nehru. It's called Enter the Soothsayer. It is just a two-page chapter at page 374 of that book. Pandit Nehru derided astrology and told Sinha that Nehru didn't appreciate Sinha's fondness for astrology and astrologers. He called them derisively patriwalas. Then, after some time, after Pandit Nehru spent some time with Mr. Sinha, when he was coming out, he saw the astrologer again and he couldn't resist the temptation to taunt him. And this is all written beautifully in that chapter. The astrologer tolerated the insinuation. But when the provocation was a little derisive, he turned back and told Panditji, I have got your Janma Patri with me. Don't be too cynical about astrology. I'll give you one or two things now. Your friend, Mr. Maulana Azad, will have a fall on a particular day. He mentioned that day. And 3 days later, he will pass away. And he told Pandit Nehru, don't be too sure of your own science. If you don't propitiate the gods, you will not see the sunlight on the 28th of May, 1964. This was well in advance. This is virtually, this whole thing is the content of this chapter in Curzon to Nehru by Durga Das. Pandit Nehru became angry. Somehow Mr. Sinha separated them. On the day the astrologer had mentioned about Maulana Azad, Maulana Azad had had a fall. Pandit Nehru became a little serious. He telephoned to Sinha and said, look at this, this man had told us, but Bidan, Mr. B.C. Ray was the doctor, Bidan says that there is no danger to his life. On the day which the astrologer had mentioned, Azad passed away. Pandit Nehru became alert, and the book says thereafter, every day he would send a busload of priests to Kalkaji temple for worship, for propitiation of the gods. But he couldn't see the sunlight on the 28th of May, 1964. This is an authentic report. Durga Das is not some kind of irresponsible writer. He was a very, very honored and very respected journalist. The kind of whole thing today, we see a kind of a derisive denunciation of the art and science of astrology, of religion, of the great sources of our inspiration, the Vedic learning, the Upanishadic learning. All this has come into some kind of a subject matter of very critical, derisive evaluation. Perhaps it is because people are disenchanted with institutions of governance. There's a pervasive cynicism that runs through the whole and breadth of society. And perhaps also that those who were supposed to be scholarly and religious, the class of people who are supposed to propagate religion, values of society, they have themselves declined and degenerated. More than anything else, I think a tyrannical feudal order with an anarchical society has collapsed. And when a civilization or a society grimly struggles to transform itself into a modern egalitarian industrial society, there is so much volatility and violence in society. There is so much of unrest. We saw that happening in China. They called it the Cultural Revolution, the Chinese Cultural Revolution, which is itself a metaphor for the transformation of that society into a modern society. It was only in 1979 they opened up to the world in economics. When China transformed itself in the late 40s, 50 million people died in the course of that revolution. It was a bloody episode in Chinese history. In a non-trivial sense, the same forces are unleashed in India as a result of the disappointment of people with their religious leaders and their political masters, and a pervasive disenchantment with the institutions of democracy and institutions of governance. You see collapse everywhere. See, every department of governance, there is pervasive corruption and decline and decay. It is in such circumstances unreasonable to be disappointed if political and social behavior do not come up to our expectations, our standards. This, again, has been the cause of a lot of unrest in the youth, pessimism in the elderly, and a kind of a licentious behavior of the political class, the bureaucratic class. We have to reckon with bureaucratic lethargy and administrative inertia, which is very critical at a time that we pass through today. Last century, 20th century, was a century of science and technology. If 20th century was 100 years of science and technology and progress, 21st century, it is said, is not mere 100 years of science and technology, but will be 20,000 years compared to the last century. The growth of science, explosion of science and technology will be nearly 200 times. 200 into 100 will be 20,000. 200 times that we witnessed in the 20th century. In such states of unrest, where do we seek solace? Where do we seek values? The story of Rama has been told and retold any number of times. In the South India, it is the Valmiki, the Sanskrit Valmiki Ramayana. North India is both Valmiki and Tulsidas Ramcharitmanas. These two have still having a sway on our emotions and minds. And it is said Valmiki Ramayana had a lot of interpolations in the course of its being told and retold. Many stories gain in the telling, many stories lose in the telling. And the Oriental Research Institute in Baroda assembled a team of great scholars, a great team, a very good team, and brought out a critical edition of Valmiki Ramayana. There are many recensions of that Valmiki's Ramayana in South. The Kumbakonam recension, as they call it, is supposed to be authentic. But the most authentic is the critical edition, as it's called, the Baroda Oriental Research Institute. This Rama story, there are many people who criticize this story. Some of them are emotionally disturbed at the way Sri Ramchandra himself is supposed to have treated his royal consort, Sita. After the battle was over, she was asked to come. She immediately wanted to rush up and to see him. The messenger who went there told him the royal orders of Sri Ramchandra is that you must deck yourself, bathe, dress yourself, deck yourself in jewelry and come. When she came, what he said was something which was very, very, very difficult for us, for anyone to understand. He told her, you have been in the custody of a Rakshasa. I have no trust in you. No more do I respect you. You may choose your way, choose anybody you want and go with him. Some of the most cruel words that any husband can use to a gracious, devoted wife. And she says, and that has been the subject matter of great criticism. And when Rama was himself asked, why did you do this? He said, I did it for education of the world. Loka shikshanarthantu. This is the purpose for which I did this. It's very difficult for small mortals like us to absorb. We are all great admirers of Sita, and she is the universal mother. And we find, but the story is very, very difficultly woven. Now, they said, there are many, many editions. We just heard a beautiful speech by Mr. Ganesh. He gave us an idea of the range of thoughts that are woven around this great epic. There are many Ramayanas. Today we have had the privilege of releasing Sureshwara Ramayana. This is a beautiful summary of the essence of the sentiments and thoughts that pervade, that are woven into that great original Valmiki's great composition. He says, there's a reminder for all of us. In Ramayana, there is one beautiful statement. He says, Attanatthantare buddhi nishitapi nashobhate ghathayanti hi karyani duta panditamaninaha. Panditamanina is a man who thinks too much of himself. He says, without a perception of moral means and ends, without a perception of the morality of the means and ends, intellect will be a self-stultifying instrument. Our intelligence will become a self-stultifying instrument. Ghatayanti karyani, the scornful impatience of the egoist, surely wrecks his own mission. This is the beautiful statement of the dilemma of the modern man. The intellect is a self-stultifying instrument. If knowledge does not grow, growth of knowledge is not accompanied by corresponding growth of wisdom, then the disaster, they say, disaster rides on a sunbeam of science. Growth of science without growth of wisdom is going to be a disaster. The Ramayana is full of this story of how a man can survive, build a caring and just society. I'm grateful to you for the invitation that you have given to me. I'm grateful to you for your patience and courtesy. Thank you very much.